The prairie had a way of swallowing sound and time. As Cole Maverick rode down the lonely dirt road, even the clop of his horse's hooves seemed to fade into the vastness. The sun hung low, bleeding orange across the sky, and the wind carried the dry whisper of autumn grass brushing against his boots. He was a drifter, had been for nearly a decade now, and he carried no more than a saddlebag, a worn hat, and a heart patched together with too many old sorrows. 3 days he'd been riding since he last spoke to another soul. His water canteen was light, his food gone, and the ache in his ribs told him he'd pushed himself farther than he should have. But he kept going. A man like him didn't stop unless he had a reason. And for a long time, he hadn't had one. But this place, this lonely stretch of land, felt different. As he approached the small homestead set against the rolling plains, Cole slowed his horse. The farm looked like it was holding on by its fingernails. Fences slumped. The vegetable patch was choked with weeds. The barn door leaned as though a stiff wind might knock it flat. In the house sagged on one side, roof patched with whatever scraps someone could find. He didn't see any livestock. No chickens, no pigs, not even a stray dog. Just silence. Cole swung off the saddle, boots hitting the dust with a thud. The house's door creaked open before he could raise a hand to knock. A woman stepped out, thin, pale from worry more than lack of sun. Her hair was tied back in a loose, hurried braid, and her dress, though clean, was worn at the hems. Grief clung to her like a second skin. Cole had seen that look before, in mirrors, in strangers, in war widows who had lost more than they could bear. "You're here for the repairs?" she asked, her voice so frail it nearly blew away with the wind. Cole tipped his hat. "If you're needin' someone to fix things, I reckon I can oblige." She gave a small, timid nod. She seemed surprised someone had even stopped. As though people usually rode right past without a word. And maybe they did. Cole didn't ask questions. A drifter learns, questions make folks close their doors, and silence opens them. He got to work immediately. First the fence, where a whole panel had rotted through and fallen. He ripped out the broken boards, replaced them with sturdier pieces from the pile stacked haphazardly against the barn. The sound of hammering echoed through the empty fields, startling a flock of birds from the tall grass. Next the barn door. He lifted it, realigned the hinges, and tightened the bolts until it swung true again. Sweat dripped down his temples, mixing with dust, but he paid it no mind. When he paused for water, barely a sip left in his canteen, he noticed the woman watching him from the porch. She didn't speak, didn't intrude, but every so often, he caught her wiping her eyes, as though she wasn't used to anyone helping without wanting something in return. By midday, Cole was chopping wood. The logs were stubborn, knotted and thick, but he split them clean in steady rhythms. Each crack of the axe seemed to breathe life back into the homestead. A small stack of firewood grew beside the porch, more than enough to last through the first cold snap. Hours passed. The sun climbed high and then dipped toward the horizon again. Not once did she approach him. Not once did he stop unless it was to catch his breath or wipe his brow. By the time he finished patching the roof, teetering on the ladder he'd reinforced with rope, the sky had begun turning purple with dusk. Cole climbed down slowly. His muscles ached, his stomach growled, but as he looked across the small farm, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. Just for a moment, he wasn't a man drifting from place to place. He was someone useful, someone needed. For a long moment, the widow didn't move. Her lips trembled, her eyes fixed on the dirt between them as though she expected it to swallow her whole. Cole stood quiet, letting the silence stretch, not the heavy kind that suffocates, but the patient kind that waits for truth to rise on its own. At last she managed to speak. "I didn't mean to deceive you," she said, voice raw and thin. "I thought maybe if you started fixing things, I'd find a way to gather some money before you finished. I had nothing, but I hoped." She lifted her apron to her face and wiped at eyes that had dried up too many times already. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you work all day." Cole shifted the weight in his stance, resting one hand against the worn leather of his belt. "Ma'am, if I thought you were trying to trick me, I wouldn't have touched a single tool on this property." She looked up, startled. "Then why?" "Because you needed the help," he said simply. The words hit her like a blow softened by kindness. Her breath shook, shoulders quivering. Finally she sank onto the edge of the porch step, elbows on her knees, fingers gripping the fabric of her dress. Cole didn't approach. He knew better. He'd seen enough broken hearts to understand that sometimes, people need space to gather the pieces. My husband died 2 months ago, she confessed, her voice fragile. Not from sickness or injury. From a debt he couldn't repay. She swallowed hard. They took everything. The livestock, the tools, the savings, everything he'd worked his life for. And when they left, they told me I had 1 month to leave this land, or they'd take the house too. Cole's jaw tightened, anger surfacing in the quiet steel of his eyes. Men did that, she nodded. He owed money after our last harvest failed. He wasn't a bad man, just unlucky, and desperate. I begged him not to deal with them. She took a shaky breath. But he said it was the only way to keep us alive. When he couldn't pay back what they demanded, they made an example of him. Her voice fractured. The porch boards creaked as she curled inward, trying and failing to keep her composure. Cole's chest tightened painfully. I'm sorry for your loss, he said, meaning every word. She nodded faintly but kept staring at her hands. I've been trying to hold the place together myself, but I'm only one person. I can't lift the heavy beams. I can't fix the roof. I can't chop enough wood to get through winter. And every day I feel the land slipping through my fingers, like sand I can't hold onto. A gust of wind swept across the plains, rattling the dry weeds against the fence he had repaired. Cole followed the sound with his eyes, then spoke quietly, choosing his words like stepping stones. When I was 19, he said slowly, I had a wife. The widow's gaze lifted, her tears pausing for the first time as if her sorrow recognized its twin in someone else. She didn't get to see 20, he continued. Fever took her, too fast to understand, too fast to say goodbye. The widow's breath hitched. Something softened in her expression, not pity, but recognition. The kind of understanding shared only by those who've had something vital ripped away. She used to tell me, Cole said, staring toward the dying light of the sun, a kind act is never lost, Cole. It just finds its way back home someday. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile a man makes when remembering something that hurts and heals at the same time. I tried living by that, even after I lost her. Even when it felt like nothing good could possibly find its way to me again. The widow wiped her cheeks, tears falling freely now, not from shame but something gentler, relief, maybe, or the first breath after. Drowning. You fixed everything, she whispered. And I gave you nothing in return. Cole turned back to her, his boots sinking softly into the dusty earth. You gave me work, he said. Gave me a place to rest my hands for a while. That's more than you know. But work without pay is charity, she argued weakly. And I don't want to be a burden. Night settled slowly, like a thick blanket being drawn across the sky. The last traces of daylight faded into bruised purples and deep blues as Cole saddled his horse beside the fence he had rebuilt. The lantern on the widow's porch flickered, casting long shadows that swayed with the wind. The widow stood there, hands clasped to her chest, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She looked small against the darkening plains, but not fragile, more like a candle still burning in an empty room, refusing to go out. You should at least stay for supper, she said softly. It wasn't a command, nor a request, it was a plea disguised as hospitality. A quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, he would stay a little longer so the night wouldn't feel so big. Cole shook his head gently. Storm's comin', he said, tilting his chin toward the horizon. I need to find shelter while I still got moonlight to guide me. A gust of cold wind swept across the fields, and the widow tightened her shawl. The clouds overhead were gathering thick and heavy, promising rain, or maybe snow. He placed a boot in the stirrup, but he didn't swing up. Not yet. Something held him there, rooted in place. Maybe the way she watched him, like watching a door closing for good. Maybe the way the house looked after all his repairs, still worn, but standing stronger now. Or maybe it was the ache in his chest, the familiar ache he felt every time he left a place that had needed him. Cole reached into his coat. A moment passed where the widow thought he was grabbing gloves or maybe a map. But instead, he pulled out a small leather pouch, worn and tied with a faded cord. He tossed it lightly toward her. She caught it clumsily, startled by the weight of it. The sound of coins clinking inside made her eyes widen. What is this? She whispered, clutching the pouch as though it might vanish. Enough coin to get you through the next 2 months, Cole said simply. Her breath cracked, not just a gasp, something deeper, more broken. No, I can't take this, she stammered. This is your travel money. Please, I can't. You need it more, Cole interrupted gently. She shook her head fiercely, eyes filling with tears. But I gave you nothing. You gave me something important, he said. A reason to stop. A day where I wasn't just driftin'. That's worth more than money. Her tears spilled, shining in the lantern glow. She clutched the pouch against her heart as though holding something fragile and precious. Why? She finally asked, her voice breaking. Why would you do this for someone you don't even know? Cole took a slow breath. His eyes softened, distant, as though seeing someone who wasn't there. Because nobody helped me when my world fell apart, he said quietly. I buried my wife with my own hands. And after that, folks just passed me by. A man lost in his grief is invisible to others. His voice caught, but he kept steady. I ain't letting someone else feel that kind of alone. Not if I can stop it. The widow took a shaky step toward him. The wind whipped at her shawl, but she didn't seem to notice. You saved my home, she whispered. You saved me. How'd I ever repay that? Cole looked at her with something gentle, something that carried warmth despite all the cold he'd lived through. You take care of yourself, he said. That's all the payment I need. He finally swung onto his horse. The animal snorted, sensing the storm rolling closer. The sky grumbled with distant thunder. The widow took another step, then stopped herself. She wanted to call him back. Every part of her wanted to, but something deep inside told her he was a man who moved like the wind. He stayed where he was needed only long enough to mend what was broken, never long enough to risk breaking again himself. Will I ever see you again? She asked, voice trembling across the distance between them. Cole tipped his hat, eyes glimmering with something bittersweet. World's a big place, ma'am. But maybe one day. He nudged his horse. As he rode away, the storm clouds above split briefly, revealing a strip of moonlight that fell across the dirt road like a silver path guiding him onward. The widow watched until he was nothing but a shadow swallowed by the darkening plains. The wind carried his last words back to her, soft as a memory and just as fleeting.